The sun was setting over the quiet road, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. A black SUV rolled into a small, dusty gas station on the edge of town. It was the kind of place most people drove past without stopping. But Derek needed gas, and he was running low. He stepped out of the car slowly. He was tall, calm, and silent. His dark eyes scanned the area. He wore simple clothes, black boots, jeans, and a gray hoodie. His face was hard to read. He looked like a man with no time for trouble. Inside the gas station, the clerk glanced up from his phone. He was a skinny young guy, barely out of high school. When he saw Derek, he straightened up. Not because Derek looked dangerous, but because something about him felt heavy, like a man carrying many secrets. As Derek filled up his tank, a loud sound broke the peace. 3 motorcycles roared into the gas station. The bikes were big and dirty, and the men riding them looked just as rough. They wore leather jackets with skulls on the back. One had a long red beard, another was bald with tattoos on his head, and the third was tall with mean eyes. The bikers parked near Derek's SUV, laughing and yelling. "Well, look what we have here," the red-bearded one said loudly. "Lost, are you, boy?" Derek didn't answer. He finished filling the tank, closed the cap, and walked toward the station to pay. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the bald one said, stepping in front of Derek. Derek stopped. He looked at the man, just looked. No fear, no anger, just calm, cold eyes. The kind of look that made the gas station clerk stop breathing for a second. "You deaf or just rude?" the third biker asked, moving to block the door. Derek spoke for the first time. "I don't want trouble." His voice was deep but quiet, like the sound of distant thunder before a storm. "Oh, we got a tough guy here." The red-bearded biker laughed. "Don't want trouble, huh? Then maybe you should have kept driving." Inside the station, the clerk watched with growing worry. He reached under the counter and hovered his hand near the phone. He didn't know why, but something felt wrong. Not with the bikers, but with the quiet man. Derek looked at the 3 men again. Still calm, still silent. Then he stepped to the side, gently moving past the bald biker blocking the door. He walked in, placed some cash on the counter, and said, "Pump 3. The clerk nodded nervously. He didn't ask questions. As Derek turned to leave, he noticed the bikers were now standing around his SUV. One of them kicked a tire. Another leaned against the hood. Derek walked outside, slow and steady. "No anger, no fear. Don't touch my car," he said firmly. "Or what?" The tall biker grinned. "You gonna call someone? Police don't care about guys like you out here." Derek didn't answer. He just stared at the man. That stare, it wasn't normal. It wasn't loud or threatening, but it made the tall biker step back just a little. Something in that look said, "You have no idea who I am, the B." Red-bearded biker scoffed. "This one's got attitude. Maybe he needs a lesson in respect." But the bald one held up a hand. "Wait. Look at his eyes, man. You see that? That's not fear. That's not even anger. That's something else." The bikers paused. For just a second, they felt unsure. Derek walked past them, opened the driver's door, and got inside. He didn't rush. He didn't even glance at them again. As he drove away, dust rising behind his SUV, the gas station fell silent. The bikers looked at each other. They didn't say a word. Inside the store, the young clerk let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked at the empty road and whispered, "Who was that guy?" Because deep inside, he knew. Derek wasn't just a quiet man passing through. He was something else, something dangerous, something trained. Derek drove down the quiet highway, his hands steady on the wheel. Trees passed by on both sides of the road, and the sun had now dipped below the horizon. Darkness slowly covered the land. His face stayed calm, but his eyes kept checking the rearview mirror. He wasn't alone. Far behind, 3 motorcycles followed. Their headlights flickered in the mirror, the same 3 bikers from the gas station, the same ones who thought he was just another man they could scare. But Derek knew fear, and this wasn't it. He didn't speed up. He didn't panic. He had dealt with worse than this. Much worse. After 5 miles, the road split. One side led back to the highway, the other toward an open field and a small forest. Derek turned toward the field. He drove for another minute, then stopped near a quiet clearing. Tall grass blew in the wind. No lights, no houses, just silence. He turned off the engine. He stepped out slowly, closing the door behind him. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder. They were close now. Soon, the 3 bikes came into view. They parked their motorcycles in a line, engines still rumbling. The bikers got off and spread out. One of them lit a cigarette. The red-bearded one cracked his knuckles. "Well, well," he said. "You got some nerve driving off like that." Derek stood in the field, hands at his sides. "I told you. I don't want trouble." The bald biker laughed. "Too late for that. You're in the wrong town, brother. Out here no one comes to help." Derek looked at them, one by one. "Last chance, turn around, go home." The tall one spat on the ground. "Or what? You gonna scare us with those eyes again?" The red-bearded biker stepped forward, pulling out a steel chain from his belt. It clinked in his hand as he swung. "It's slowly. No one talks to us like that. Especially not you," he said, stepping closer. Derek didn't move. The chain swung toward his head. In one blink, it was over. Derek ducked under the swing, grabbed the biker's wrist, and twisted. A loud crack echoed in the night air. The chain fell to the ground. The biker screamed and dropped to his knees, holding his broken arm. The other 2 rushed in. The bald one threw a punch. Derek blocked it with his forearm and slammed his elbow into the man's ribs. The biker stumbled, back, gasping for air. The tall one came with a crowbar. He swung hard. Derek sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and threw him over his shoulder. The biker hit the ground with a thud. Silence. Only the wind moved now. 3 grown men lay groaning on the ground, in pain, in shock. Derek stood over them, not even breathing hard. "You chose this," he said quietly. "I warned you." He turned and walked back to his car. The bikers didn't follow. They couldn't. Inside the car, Derek sat still for a moment. He looked at his hands. Strong hands. Hands that had done things most men couldn't imagine. He didn't want this life anymore, but trouble had a way of finding him. He started the engine and drove off into the night, leaving behind 3 broken men who had just learned a hard truth. This man wasn't just black, he wasn't just quiet, he was deadly, and they had picked the wrong man to mess with. The wind was cold as night covered the land. Derek drove in silence, far away from the field where the bikers had fallen. His hand stayed calm on the wheel, but his mind was sharp, focused. He knew this wasn't over. Men like that didn't just walk away. They would come back. He wasn't. Worried for himself, he could handle them. But every fight left a mark on his soul. And he was tired of being the man people feared. He just wanted peace. Back in town, the 3 injured bikers regrouped. Bruised and angry, they sat at a bar with other members of their gang. The bar was dark, filled with smoke and noise. Country music played in the background. The red-bearded biker slammed a beer on the table. His arm was in a sling. "You're telling me one guy did all that?" one of the others asked. "He moved like a ghost," said the bald biker, rubbing his ribs. "Fast, silent, he's not normal." "Black guy in a gray hoodie?" An older man in the corner asked, his voice quiet. The bikers looked at him. "Yeah," the tall one said. "You know him?" The old man nodded slowly. "I do. Or at least I knew someone like him. Years ago, in a war far from here. We called him Shadow Wolf, Special Forces top unit. Disappeared after a mission went bad. People said he died." The bar went quiet. "You're saying he's one of them?" the red-bearded biker asked. The old man took a sip of his drink. "I'm saying you picked the wrong man." The gang members looked at each other, angry, confused, but also afraid. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. They had crossed a line. The next morning, Derek parked at a small motel just outside town. He needed rest, just for one night. The clerk at the front desk gave him a room key without asking questions. People could feel something different about him. something silent, yet powerful. Derek sat on the edge of the bed. He pulled out a small photo from his backpack. It was old and worn out, a picture of a woman and a young boy, his family, long gone now. He stared at the photo, whispering, "I'm still trying to be better," but peace never stayed for long. That night, as the town slept, headlights appeared outside the motel. 4 motorcycles, 2 trucks. Men stepped out holding chains, bats, and even guns. It wasn't just 3 of them this time. It was 10. They had come for revenge. The red-bearded biker, his arm now tied to his chest, stood by the lead truck. His voice was filled with hate. "He embarrassed us, broke my arm, made us look weak. We're not leaving until we drag him out." They moved toward the motel room slowly, like hunters in the dark, but Derek was already waiting. Inside the room, he had turned off all the lights. He sat in the corner, listening. He heard the footsteps, the voices, the sound of metal scraping against concrete. He stood up, took off his hoodie, and tied back his hair. Underneath, he wore a black shirt, faded but still showing the mark of his old unit, a wolf with sharp eyes. He opened the door slowly and stepped outside. The bikers stopped. One of them raised his bat. "You think you're tough?" Derek didn't answer. He just dropped his bag on the ground. Then he moved, fast, too fast. The first man didn't even see the punch coming. He dropped like a stone. The second tried to swing a chain. Derek grabbed it mid-air, yanked him forward, and knocked him out with his elbow. A third man pulled a gun. Derek kicked it out of his hand before he could fire, spun behind him, and slammed him into the wall. Screams filled the night. It wasn't a fight, it was a message. Every move Derek made was sharp, silent, and clean. Years of war lived in his muscles. This wasn't about anger, it was about control. One by one, the bikers fell, groaning, bleeding, defeated. The last man standing was the red-bearded biker, his eyes wide with fear. He stepped back, shaking. Derek walked up to him, face calm. "Tell your people," he said. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I won't be hunted." Then he turned his back and walked away. The red-bearded man didn't follow. He couldn't. He had never felt fear like this before. Not from a gun, not from a storm, but from a man who could destroy without even raising his voice. The sun rose over the small town, casting soft light on the quiet streets. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. People whispered. Something had happened the night before. Something big, something scary. At the local diner, old men sat around their coffee cups, talking in low voices. "You hear what happened at the motel?" one man said. "I heard 10 of them went in. Only 1 walked out without a limp," another replied. "They say it was one man, one black man." A waitress shook her head. "I don't believe it. No one man can do that." But an older truck driver nearby spoke. You didn't see him," he said. "I did. At the gas station. He moved like a soldier, like he's been through hell and came back colder." At the sheriff's office, Sheriff Keller leaned back in his chair, listening to his deputy's report. "Witnesses say it was self-defense," the deputy said. "No guns fired, no one dead, but a lot of broken bones." The sheriff rubbed his chin. "One man did all that?" "Yes, sir." Keller frowned. "Where is he now?" "Gone," the deputy replied. "Checked out of the motel this morning. No ID, paid in cash, just disappeared." The sheriff stared out the window. "Find out who he is, quietly. I want answers, not noise." Meanwhile, Derek drove out of town, taking the back roads. He had no plan, just a need to keep moving. The motel fight had drawn too much attention. He never wanted that. He only wanted peace. He pulled into a small roadside park and sat alone. On a bench under a tree. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the wind on his face. Then he heard a voice. "Hey." He opened his eyes. A young boy stood a few feet away, holding a basketball. "You're the guy from the motel," the boy said. Derek didn't speak. "My uncle saw what you did. Said you beat up a whole gang by yourself." Derek sighed. "That's not something to admire." The boy looked confused. "But they were bad. You were the hero." Derek looked away. "I'm not a hero, kid. Just someone who's trying To stay out of trouble. The boy nodded slowly. You used to be a soldier? Derek didn't answer. The boy sat beside him. My dad was a soldier too. He died in war. I never got to meet him. Derek looked at the boy's face. It reminded him of his own son, before the accident, before the silence. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Your dad was a brave man. So are you, the boy said softly. Then he ran off with his basketball. Derek watched him go, something heavy stirring inside his chest. He hadn't felt that in a long time. Connection. Back in town, the bikers who survived the motel fight were silent. Some were still in the hospital. Others just left town, too ashamed to show their faces. But the leader, the red-bearded one, wasn't done. He sat in a dark room, making a call. He's more than we thought, he told the voice on the other. And I want backup, real backup. The voice was deep, cold, dangerous. I'll send them. The red-bearded biker smiled, a twisted look in his eye. This time, we bring him down. That evening, Derek stopped at a small diner outside the next town. He ordered a simple meal, coffee, eggs, toast. The waitress brought it over, her hands shaking a little. You're him, aren't you? She asked. Derek didn't look up. No, just passing through. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. As Derek ate, he felt it, that old feeling. Danger. He looked outside. 2 black SUVs parked across the road. Men stepped out. Not bikers this time, not amateurs. Professionals, military clothes, tactical gear, serious weapons. They weren't there to scare, they were there to kill. Derek wiped his mouth with a napkin, stood up, and walked out the back door. The time for peace had ended. They wanted a war, and they were about to get one. The sun was going down again. Derek walked through the back door of the diner and disappeared into the trees behind it. His boots barely made a sound on the leaves. His eyes scanned the shadows, calm but alert. The men in black SUVs were not regular troublemakers. They moved like soldiers. He knew the look, the walk, the way they scanned the street. These were trained killers, and they weren't here to talk. Derek needed to disappear, but not run. He had to pull them in, on his terms. So he set a trap. Just outside town, there was an old sawmill, abandoned, broken windows, rusted machines, no lights, no cameras. Perfect. Derek had passed it earlier and made a mental note. Now he returned, fast and quiet. He moved through the broken side entrance and scanned the inside. He checked the floors, the windows, the best spots to strike. He had only a small backpack with him, but it held everything he needed. Rope, a small mirror, a flashlight, a lighter, and a combat knife. He had no guns, but he didn't need them. Meanwhile, the 2 black SUVs split into 2 teams. One stayed near the diner. The other followed Derek's faint trail into the woods. Target is on foot. East side, moving fast. One of them said into a radio. Engage only when secure, came the reply. He's dangerous. The leader of the group, a man named Riker, stepped out of the SUV wearing a vest with 3 rows of bullets and a silencer pistol at his side. He's ex-Special Forces, Riker said to his team. Black Ops, silent kills, no backup, and we don't underestimate him. The men nodded, they moved. By the time they reached the sawmill, Derek was gone, or so they thought. They entered slowly, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Clear. Left, one man said. Clear right, said another. But it wasn't clear. Not at all. One man stepped over a tripwire and triggered a can of metal scraps. It crashed to the ground. Loud. They turned, guns raised, but no shots fired. Then the lights went out. A second man fell to the ground, screaming. His ankle caught in a rope trap. Then silence. One by one, they were being picked off. No gunshots. No yelling. Just quick strikes and shadows. Riker turned in a full circle, heart pounding. Where is he? A voice came from above. You came into my jungle. He looked up. Too late. Derek dropped from the rafters, kicking Riker in the chest. The man hit the ground hard. Another soldier raised his rifle. But Derek swung a metal bar and knocked him out cold. The fight was quick. Brutal. One by one, the trained soldiers fell. Derek didn't stop. He moved like water. No wasted motion. No sound, no mercy. 5 minutes later, the sawmill was silent again. Derek stood in the middle of the floor. Around him, men lay unconscious, groaning in pain. He walked over to Riker, who was crawling toward his radio. Derek knelt beside him. "You were hired," he said. Riker nodded weakly. "A biker gang. Said you hurt their people. Paid us well." Derek's face stayed still. "You should have asked why I hurt them. They said that you were dangerous." Derek looked him in the eye. "I am, but only when I need to be." He stood and left. No more games. This wasn't about running anymore. It was time to end this. Back at the biker gang's hideout, the red-bearded leader sat in a dark room, laughing as he drank. "They'll bring me his head," he said to a friend. But just then the front door burst open. Smoke rolled in. Footsteps followed. Then a voice. "No one's bringing you anything." The red-bearded man stood up, pale with fear. No. Derek had come. Smoke filled the biker hideout as Derek stepped inside. He walked slowly, calmly. His eyes scanned the room. 10 bikers stood around, shocked and frozen. In the center, the red-bearded leader dropped his drink. It shattered on the floor. "You," he whispered. Derek didn't answer. He just looked around. "You brought this on yourselves," Derek said, his voice low. One biker pulled a knife and charged. "Bad idea." Derek sidestepped him, grabbed his arm, twisted it, and dropped him in. One clean motion. Another biker tried swinging a bat. Derek blocked it, kicked the man's leg, and sent him crashing into a table. Screams filled the air. It wasn't a fight. It was a message. The red-bearded leader backed away. "We were just trying to scare you, that's all. You didn't have to go this far." Derek walked toward him, slow and steady. "You followed me. You sent killers after me. You came after me because of the color of my skin. That's not fear. That's hate." "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Derek cut in. "At the gas station, in the field, at the motel. You laughed. You called me names. You thought I was weak." The biker shook his head, sweating. "We didn't know who you were." "That's the problem," Derek said, stepping closer. "You never cared to know." The room went silent. Bikers groaned on the floor. Some crawled away. Others sat with their backs against the wall, too afraid to move. Derek stood face to face with the red-bearded man. But he didn't hit him. He didn't raise his fists. He just looked him in the eye and said, "This ends here. I'm not coming back. But if any of you come after me again, I won't hold back." The red-bearded man nodded quickly, eyes wide with fear. Derek turned and walked out. No more blood. No more war. It was over. Outside, the night was quiet. The wind was cool. Derek walked to the road where his car was parked. He opened the door but paused before getting in. A sound came from behind. Footsteps. He turned, ready for anything, but it was the sheriff. Sheriff Keller stood alone, hands at his sides. "I heard what happened," the sheriff said. "Words all over town." Derek said nothing. "You could have killed them all," Keller continued. "But you didn't. Why?" Derek looked him in the eye. "Because I've seen too much death, and I'm tired of being a weapon." The sheriff nodded. "Where will you go?" "Doesn't matter. I don't stay in one place for long." Keller reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Background check came back. Took me a while. You really were Special Forces. Shadow Wolf, they called you." Derek didn't take the paper. "I don't use that name anymore." Keller smiled slightly. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, thanks for cleaning up the trash. We couldn't do it." Derek got into the car. Before closing the door, he looked at the sheriff. "They'll think twice before doing it again." Then he drove off into the night. Miles away, he stopped at a hilltop and stepped out of the car. He looked at the stars, so quiet, so far from war. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo of his wife and son again. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "I didn't lose control." A tear rolled down his cheek, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from peace. For the first time in a long time, he felt free.